Alright, so a quick walkthrough of my Tempest Rising track Tankbuster, which seems to be or at least one of the favorites of my tracks. Let's go through it. Basically, the start of the track is all ambient synth stuff. As far as I remember, it's mainly, it's my MS-20 through some effects. And I believe actually this is my guitar running through some modular effects, or might even just be some weird ass guitar pedals. But it's really cool. And then down here, that synth git, that has to be the guitar going through some synth array. Honestly, I can't remember all these. It's been quite a while, but I kind of have somewhat of an idea of what's going on. Straight into this. Mainly just a building effect up to the first main guitar part. And I have to say, before I get into this, if you listen here when I stop the track, there's this little sweep, and that's just this one. It's one of my favorite distortion plugins, but if you drive it a bit too hard, it gives out that small harmonic. But I needed to drive it that hard, and once the track is actually playing and you're not stopping it here and then it doesn't make a difference. So we get straight into this. We have this little lead going underneath. We of course have the guitars and bass riff. And the drums, of course. And these drums are recorded, but on an electronic kit. So I, for example, can have the overheads. Whoa. Don't want the bass, just want the overheads. So I can have that without all the nonsense of snare and kick and so on. I have other tracks that Life Harvester was recorded with real drums, but this one was an electronic kit, but all me on drums. And together it all is basically this. Oh, of course, I forgot. There are also synth leads. And some small sound effects down here. That goes on, and it basically goes into what I would call the verse, basically. And as you can see, the guitars are edited a bit here. It's basically just to make it a bit tighter. If I could have left it in, but you know, stuff like this, where everything kind of needs to be a bit more locked in, it just works better to edit it. You get rid of a lot of noise and palm mute stuff and stuff like that, which wasn't necessary in the bass, because it's much more open and not so much scratching around the strings. Again, just drums. Nothing special really going on. Continues into this part of the track, which is basically it's not really a breakdown, but it's a, you know, you get that halftime feel. We actually have a pulse going underneath. Just basically, you can't really hear the actual pulse only if you really listen, but it kind of gives another sub level to this bass, which kind of really like a real recorded bass guitar like this kind of really stops working beneath 40-50 hertz. There's not really much going on there, so basically just filling it out, since we are getting into a more slower pace where more low end is basically allowed, or can be perceived by the ear, which it just really can't when you have a lot of stuff going on. So that goes on, and then we get into what I would call the chorus of the track, which is basically the intro again with some minor added details. And we get into this part, small little drop with, well, I guess this is all affected by this. It's MS-20 synth going through some distortion and some sound effects. That, together with a quick little guitar riff, and then we just get into it. And that's basically just the same again, and we get into a more halftime groovy thing. Oh no, we actually don't, but yeah, I'll get to that later because it's fun. Yeah, so we get into this, basically a reuse of some of the intro parts, right? We have a bit of leads underneath. Then we get into what is essentially a breakdown, right? And on this, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, okay. So for this to really bang on drums, we add I basically just call it a huge snare reverb to really give it that space. Again, now it's even slower, so we have even more space for these small kinds of details, right? So for example, if I turn off this, suddenly it doesn't really sound like much, right? But then when we turn it on, now we got a bit more balls on the snare, right? So that goes on, and we get into this part, which is basically just going straight into the chorus again, going 2 parts into the chorus, and that's basically it for the track, right? Not much happens here. We get straight to the outro, which is a third kind of version of the intro that kind of shows itself throughout the track, right? This time with the pulse going underneath. So what I was talking about before is because it's been such a long time, and I'm kind of remembering it as I've kind of wrote the track. So here it was actually a bit different. So instead of going down like this, it actually went straight into, as far as I remember, I still have it over here. It continued into this. Another kind of like halftime feel. And then straight into this. Just to get the old early 2000s deathcore vibes out of the way, right? So that was actually meant to go there. So like right here, and we go straight into this, and then after this, supposed to go right here, right? But I can't remember why we took it out, but basically it just for the game it didn't fit. I don't know why exactly. We didn't talk much about why it didn't fit. It was basically just a kind of situation where I was just asked to do something different. So there is that small part which is lacking from the track, but it is what it is, right? So that's basically Tankbuster. There's not much to it. It's not a million tracks. It's basically just like if a metal band were playing a track, basically. So that's it for Tankbuster. Let me know if you have any questions or anything else that you would like for me to share, and I'll see if it is possible to do. This is a fairly new-ish session, so nothing has corrupted or disappeared, or no old plugins has died on me or anything, so I was luckily able to pull this out. I actually don't think this is the final mix. No, it's not. But this is the writing session, basically, I guess. So thank you for checking this out. Let me know if you have any questions. Other than that, see you around, I hope. Bye bye.